Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 98 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we're going to be discussing the meta overall leading into the big tournament taking place within Ravensburg in Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong, Moyen, but I believe this is going to be like a 500 player event. I think that was the number or the cap. As he goes to research if that is accurate. But yeah, it's like the biggest tournament that's happening in Lorcana at the moment, within Europe at least. And it's just exciting to see more tournaments, more things to compete in. So it should be a good time. We're going to be talking about our thoughts on the meta leading into that event. We're also going to be breaking down an 88 player event that took place in Belgium, because there were some cool deck lists that we saw from that. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit. So, I was in Tokyo for the past 10 days, mainly for Star Wars Celebration, which is a big convention, basically, for everything Star Wars, if you guys didn't know. And, I want to talk to you guys about my experience and my journey with trying to find Lorcana within Japan, which was really, really cool. I went to many shops. Many shops didn't have Lorcana, but then some shops did, and it was really, really cool. I wanted to get certain cards, so for myself, I wanted to get some Amber Emerald cards. I wanted to get some Ruby Sapphire cards for my fiance Kim, and then on the very last day, I spotted some enchanted cards. I'm going to be putting up some images during this episode, but yes, I caved. I now own an enchanted Elsa. I never thought I'd say I own an enchanted Elsa, but it is a Japanese enchanted Elsa. But yeah, I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, before we jump into things, Moyen, how was your week in Lorcana been? How have you been prepping for this tournament in general? Are you kind of still doing something similar from the event that happened last weekend, or sorry, two weekends ago? Or you kind of have a similar mindset? Do you think? You haven't played your LCCC game against Artabax yet, right?
Yeah, I'm playing it in like 3 hours.
Cool.
So last week was both finding something to play in Ravensburg, but also preparing for my match against Artabax.
Sure.
So I'll most likely play either something similar to what I was playing 2 weeks ago with the Ruby Sapphire top 8. Or I'll just play something similar to the Green Purple that I'm now playing in the LCCC. Because most of my focus has been on these two decks. For now, I think it just makes sense to stick to one of them. And then maybe after that, re-explore some other color combinations for the set.
I think it's actually quite interesting with how this event is positioned in terms of, like, do you think this might set a I mean, since it's going to be one of the biggest Lorcana events we've had in a while, it might set the precedent for what a lot of people might want to play leading into their set champs, right? Because I believe the set champ season starts in May, so it could most definitely influence a lot of players' choices when it comes to set champs. So I think that's going to be particularly interesting. But before we jump into talking about the decks and the metagame, we do, of course, as always, have our Spilled Ink section. This is our listener question section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to pop a comment down below. The first one is from Josh. They say, on the topic of Amber Sapphire, how about instead of efficient removal, giving this ink pairing a reliable way to deal with removal / board wipes? For example, Lilo, Old School Tala, or the Merlin package. So I was a little bit confused on this comment when I read it at first. The Lilo, I'm assuming, how to deal with board wipes. I'm assuming they're just talking about the set 6 Lilo that recurs, that once it gets cleared you can play it again. Old School Tala, no idea what they mean. I'm guessing maybe that's the 2-cost Tala that when it dies it goes into the inkwell. And then when it's talking about or the Merlin package, I mean, I appreciate the idea of, okay, what do we need to add to Amber Sapphire? I appreciate the thoughts and I appreciate the ideas, but the idea of just putting the Merlin package into any deck probably makes it better, because it's a butt ton of card draw. I don't even know if it makes Amber Sapphire better, because like you said, Moyen, like, removal is the key thing, but also you can't just like slot in these cards that are like Merlin Rabbit and Merlin Goat that gain more lore, because that's not what Amber Sapphire, again, the whole idea of what does this ink pairing want to do. So I think it can have more removal, but it's gonna be in the form of the ones that we've seen, like the Let It Go, like the Hades. What, like, I guess this is an interesting question to think about, or interesting way to approach this in terms of what amber removal do we have. The only one that comes to mind for me right now is World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which honestly, I'm not going to say the card is slept on because we haven't really been in a meta where there are enough like big bombs that the card's like that useful. But as a one or two of in a certain deck, in a certain meta, like let's say there's loads of Maui Sharks running around, there's loads of 8-cost Tamatoas, and let's say the meta had a few more big bombs like this. I think like World's Greatest Criminal Mind is particularly good at like interacting with a Maui Shark because it's like, I don't know, it's just this 3-cost inkable song that just absolutely like decimates a Maui Shark, which is like, turns out that's pretty good. So yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts on maybe the idea of just like what would more removal look like in the Amber and Sapphire kind of color pairing, right?
Yeah, I think right now the only one we have is Criminal Mind, but also like there's a mini that on play banishes a 5 strength or more, which is kind of a Criminal Mind on a stick. Which I guess that's the direction Amber's removal is going in with right now. And maybe that is okay, but to make those pieces more reliable, we could just have some like good support cards. Sometimes you see like the Queen plus Criminal Mind package pop up. If you had like some reliable good cards that have support to kind of support this removal package, I guess that could help. Still, it would require some combination, like always some card combinations to deal with a lot of the stuff.
For support, can I actually ask you the keyword of support? Can you put that on your opponent's characters when you quest? Yeah, okay, so that like that's some interesting synergy that like it's weird, like it's like when would I ever want to give my opponent's characters more strength, but it actually kind of works with World's. The problem with that is it's like like you said, there's only World's Greatest Criminal Mind and Mini, and that's it. You know, you need more support to actually make that type of archetype work. You know, so
and the support cards, they are like outside of Queen, they're not really playable either. Yeah. I guess some Sapphire support cards are better than the Amber support cards.
Yeah, they all also rely on like, that's what we're talking about, right? Like is it how much, like, is it really removal if it relies on having X, Y, and Z before you can actually like use the removal card? Yeah. If that makes sense, you know?
Well, yeah, it's conditional removal, which is definitely a lot trickier to get around with than unconditional removal. Sure. But I think that's something. And then with like being able to play around board clears, I just don't think that's really like the color combinations issue. It's like the decks can already be okay at doing that just with like Surfer Stitch, Wreck-It Ralph, maybe recurring Lilos. But what it doesn't come back from is like when it gets out tempoed and then it's just behind on the board and then all the plays are just too slow. But if you want it to be able to play around board clears better, I think the theme that Amber has would just be like reoccurring or like putting stuff, getting stuff back from the discard pile, and not really stuff that does something when it gets banished necessarily.
Sure, yeah. And I don't know how much you'd want to go into it to say like maybe you can include some bare necessities to potentially snipe some board clears, depending on how impactful you may feel that would be. But definitely interesting discussion. The next comment is from Goody Two Shoes. They say, Moyen, do you have any tips on beating Blurple when playing Ruby Sapphire? It seems to be very difficult for me. Any tips, Moyen?
Yeah, so I think it makes sense that you're somewhat struggling into it. I think the new versions of Red Blue, they're not great into some versions of Ruby of Blurple, because especially if Blurple is like heavy on Hades, they can kind of have answers for everything, right? They have stuff they have shark removal in the Hades, they have ramp, they have a proactive game plan, and then also they have like some ways to deal with locations with like crab and fox, etc. So you don't just have like this straight up game plan that always works against them. You kind of I think the matchup's very nuanced, and that you have to kind of get a read on their hand and take some risks on what what it is that they might be missing in their hand. Maybe you can stick a shark or you can stick a mana, and it doesn't take, like, yes, they have answers for a lot of the stuff that you can be playing, but as soon as some mana or shark sticks, you're also like very, very quick at leveraging that into a win.
That makes sense, yeah. I think the shark is probably the biggest thing, because like you said, sure, they might have the Hades, but besides the Hades, they don't have necessarily the best tools to deal with it. And then the mana as well at the right moment is also quite difficult to deal with, unless it's specifically like, you know, fox and crabs and stuff like that. So next comment is from Maho Basil. They say, Moyen, did you miss Elsa 5 in your LCCC list? Now, when I read this, I was like, that's why I thought you played your game already, because I thought they were asking like, oh, did you miss having it in the deck if you've played it? Or maybe the comment is like, did you just miss putting it into your deck?
Yeah, I mean, that's not what happens. I don't I hope I don't forget to put stuff into my deck. Yeah. So that was within reason. Mm-hmm. I guess I can say, like in a few hours, I might be able to tell better whether it paid off, that decision. But with what I expected Artabax to play, Elsa seemed quite low impact, which is generally much better if you're in a field where you also care more about the 3-drop Diablo, maybe even exerting a shark to trade into it. But against everything that I expected Artabax to stand for, I didn't really think I needed Elsa too much. And then also, because I didn't expect too many sharks, in the end, I think Zan submitted red-blue, which I didn't really expect. And also I expected DKP to lose if he brings red-blue, because Kurt should bring something that beats red-blue. Somehow Kurt decided to bring Amber Steel, which isn't very good against red-blue, but still was able to defeat DKP. But I guess Zan made it through with red-blue. But okay, long story short, if I didn't expect a lot of red-blue, the card that you don't really need to play in green-purple discard, if you don't expect a lot of red-blue, would be We Don't Talk About Bruno. And then if you don't, I've been cutting the counts of We Don't Talk About Bruno, and then when you cut those, Elsa also gets worse, because Elsa is great at having impact and then also being a singer for Bruno. Outside of that, I think Quickie Lucifer can do a great job at actually racing.
Sure. No, that all makes sense. The next comment is from Atlantean. They say, not really a question, but listening to your commentary on the Ruby Steel, I can't help but think a lot of decks would become more relevant if the game design focused on and gave a buff to cards that have to tap for an effect, as opposed to ETB effects, removal, and game enders. Suddenly support, challenge, and bodyguard all get power boosts. As much as I love bounce, and I've been on Ruby Amethyst since set 1, I do think it was bad for the game in retrospect. So the reason I wanted to talk about this comment was, it is interesting. Like I found the idea that sure, like if there are like less ETB effects in a card game like Lorcana, it would make all of the other effects a little bit better. You know, like you play your card and then it sticks, and then you get the benefit because you have a tap effect, or rather than that just doing something immediately. But I think, and this isn't just in Lorcana, in many other card games, like, you know, there's kind of the meme, oh, card doesn't do something on play, it's trash. Or, you know, okay, maybe not exactly that, but like cards that have powerful ETBs they're often like at the centerpiece of card games, because when you play card games, you want to play a card that has the most immediate impact as possible a lot of the time. So it makes sense why those cards are good, right? But I can also kind of understand the frustration. And then, yeah, leading into Ruby Steel, I do think that makes a bit more sense as well, yeah, because then... Well, it does and it doesn't. I still think that, let's say there wasn't as many ETBs and you have to quest and you have to do stuff, like, sure, at some stage you have to exert your characters if you're either questing, challenging, or just tapping them for an effect. But if you're against Ruby Steel, you're still going to be mindful of, okay, if I exert my character, it will give my opponent this much of an advantage for their effects of when they challenge, they draw cards, they do all of this type of stuff, right? So I do think that the comment makes sense. I think that if more things were just exerted in general, maybe Ruby Steel would be a better deck. But I also think that if that were the case in the meta, I still think players would be relatively smart enough to understand how to play around Ruby Steel as much as possible. Does that kind of make sense, Moyen, or am I kind of going off a little bit?
No, it makes sense. It's like such an interesting design question, which is like, I don't know. It can feel weird to have so many cards kind of not be super relevant just because they don't do something on play. And when like it kind of limits the design space for, okay, how powerful can a card even be that has to wait a turn before it does something cool? But then on the other hand, let's say what would the alternative be? Have the removal, like the removal in Lorcana is already like not well statted. It's pretty bad in comparison. When the removal gets even worse, it's like you just get to do your powerful things a lot with like waiting for your, but like then the interactivity is also lowered, because then you can't really stop your opponent from doing these things. Yeah, but as soon as there is the decent removal board wipes, etc., then you're really gravitating towards playing on the play effects. Yeah, so I think it's just a very, very difficult balance to have.
For sure. The next comment is from Masaka Prime. They say Ruby still needs card draw. That's all. There are plenty of great Ruby and plenty of great Steel cards, as well as characters that attack ready characters and actions that force that. But card draw via challenges is a no-go, and playing wheel is too dangerous in that deck. I love Ruby Emerald. The issue there is the Robin Hood is too vulnerable. There are many good green and red actions, but you shut down the Robin, you shut down that deck. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with this comment for the most part. I think this just, like, you know, relating to what we said last week, it makes sense. We talked through Ruby Steel a lot more. We talked through Ruby Emerald. And yeah, the Robin Hood seems like a very good centerpiece. But yeah, the stat line of it in a very Ruby-focused meta. It's actually just also relating to the comment that we just said, right? Like, it's a cool card that comes down, but it does nothing when it comes down. And then if it dies, you've done nothing, right? You know?
Yeah.
So how much have you actually interacted, or how much have you like play tested with that Ruby Robin Hood, Moyen? Like, I'm sure you've tried to have, like, you know what I mean? I'm sure you've tried to have some fun with it, and then maybe you'd be like, oh no, like, you know, this card has to survive, and then I can pop off.
Yeah, it's like I still tried it a little bit, but it's a little rough. I played against it at the first Südlor, in like round 2 or something, and it actually seemed much better than I thought. So after that, I looked into it a little bit again, but it's still missing some pieces.
Sure. The next one's from Rayo. This is from our Discord. They say, when do we think that decks limited by IP will become a fun / viable / compelling format? Specifically, your deck can include any cards from one property. I've seen this like a lot in many different places. I've spoken to some Ravensburger staff about this in terms of not like asking them like, when's this format coming, but like about the idea of like, oh, an LGS ran this format, it was really fun, you know, the Peter Pan deck versus the Snow White deck, and like trying to find out, you know, like I just like the idea of a format like that that's defined by franchises, because suddenly like the competitive player in me will still be like, well, we'll still have meta decks. We will still have meta decks, but they'll be very janky meta decks, right? In a sense, it's like, I don't know, like you think of like a Peter Pan themed deck, and suddenly you can put like, well, a lot of like decent Tinkerbells in it, right? You can play the 3-cost Steel Tinkerbell, you can play the 4-cost Emerald Tinkerbell, you can play the 3-cost Amethyst Tinkerbell. These are all like decent cards, and then you have to try and formulate. So like, I do think that, you know, in the future, if there's an official format that's like, the tricky thing about a format like this is, yes, you have to like list out every card and clearly say this is a card from this franchise. And, you know, some people will be like, oh well, it's obvious, but, you know, to newer people, and that's so that it's a proper format, everything has to be, you know, these are cards from Peter Pan, these are cards from Tangled, these are cards from Snow White. But I like the idea of it, and I think Lorcana right now, honestly, it just needs to have more ways to play the game. I think having more ways to play the game wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. And I think this particular one would maybe be the most compelling one for me to try out a little bit casually, and then maybe it could evolve into something quite interesting competitively. It would be a lot more difficult to set up and to monitor and moderate and stuff, but I definitely think it's a cool idea, and it's very on theme and on brand with Lorcana as a whole. What do you think, Moyen? Like, have you ever, like, we haven't really had to think about it, but like, you know, imagine it's like, you know, suddenly there's a themed tournament. Winner gets the ticket to Worlds. What are you playing, Moyen? Right? What are you playing?
Don't put me on the spot like this. It's like, what's the franchise from the Mims and the Rabbits?
That's the sword. That's the Sword and Stone.
Sword and Stone.
Yeah.
That could be meta.
Yeah, maybe.
Someone
plays a Lion King deck just so they can play Be Prepared, right? Like stuff like that. I don't know. It's just funny. So
yeah, it could be a fun casual format. But as you said, I guess for some it would be, there would be edge cases on like how you classify them, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I said, if you wanted to have future competitive stuff, it just gets a lot trickier, and they would have to invest a lot into it. But I think for casual stuff already, I think it's great. The final comment is from Sage Mode 3D on our Discord. They say, thoughts on Baja, aka Green Blue, and why
is it called that, by the way?
So it's Baja is like Baja Blast, which I believe, the comments will correct me, Baja Blast is like some type of like soft drink in Taco Bell. I think the Taco Bell franchise, where it's like this green blue fizzy soda drink. And I believe that's why it's called Baja Blast. But yeah, they say, why aren't more people playing it? I've been on an ever-changing list since October and find success consistently outside of the Amber Steel matchup. I mean, I don't know why more people aren't on it. I can't speak about it too much. I haven't really played the deck. You've put in the a little bit of playtesting, I know for sure, more on it.
I mean, it's been a few sets, honestly, since I put in like the most of the time that I did put into that color combination. Well, I guess there's probably a few reasons. One of them you already mentioned, with Amber Steel being quite the tough matchup. So you're already not playing a deck that's like without big weaknesses, as that can be quite difficult. And then outside of that, I think it's also a deck that can kind of at times not do too much and get overrun a little bit when you don't like ramp into a Muses that can kind of sing songs to stabilize the board quickly enough. Can kind of run out of cards if you don't get the color by Draw Engine off. So it's like it can do powerful things, but it can also fold on these small things pretty easily against like discard or against tempo heavy decks.
Sure, yeah. And like I think it's tricky as well, because you want to have certain threats stick. I think if you look at this deck and you have a look at some of the powerful openers it can have, like sure, it's probably pretty good, but it has to be about the overall consistency of the deck, right? Over multiple games against multiple different matchups and stuff. But I think the deck's definitely gotten better over time, and with a few more sets, who knows? Like it could definitely shape into something quite interesting.
That's also the other thing. It's like it is a challenging deck to play, I think. I think it's one of the harder decks, and there's not. I think a lot of people might not even put in the time if they don't see like the payoff at the end. If they think like, okay, if I put in all of this time mastering this deck, what if it's still not like
sure
a tier 1 deck or anything? And then some people might be put off of learning it even.
Yeah, we had another comment. I didn't include it in our notes, but it was just in relation to Amber Emerald, because I was asking last week, like, you know, after the results of all of the DKP Red Blues, I'm like, where are all the Amber Emeralds to combat this deck, right? And I'm like, are they all just hiding because they're scared of green steel? But there was a comment saying like something along the lines of like, oh, the Amber Emerald players, they're out there, but they like keep to themselves and they'll whip it out during set champs and stuff like that, you know? Which probably sounds right. That's probably That's kind of what I do. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
that's what I imagine Amber Emerald players to do.
yeah, not talk about anything, saying, "Oh, the deck's like, oh, it's probably okay," and then like, all the DKP red blue players come to the set champs, and then they just absolutely farm them, right?
Oh no, we didn't get any new cards since set 4. Our deck is so dead, and then bam,
bam, yeah. I just love how after we looked at Bennett's version, there's literally, you could play sets 1 to 4, and that's the deck. Like, how did we come to the point where we started taking cards out that were like set 5, 6, and 7 to going back to just playing cards from sets 1 to 4? It's a little bit baffling, and I think it's actually also kind of interesting because you think about when set 4 came out, and you're like, why weren't more people on this deck? Oh yeah, that's because when set 4 came out, the Bucky Green Steel was a thing, and that was just absolutely everywhere until it wasn't, of course. But yeah, that was our spilled ink section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, again, be sure to leave a comment down below. So I'm gonna kind of put up a bit of a slideshow as I'm talking through this, but yeah. As I said, I returned from my 10-day trip to Tokyo. I went with my fiance Kim. The main reason we went was for a trip to Star Wars Celebration, which was really, really cool. Big convention. And yeah, the first few days while we were there, as soon as we got there, actually, we went into, I think it's Akibara Station, because I'd heard online that that's the best place to go to if you're looking for Lorcana cards specifically. So we went there. It was like Japan, by the way, if any of you guys haven't been there, it's absolutely amazing. I wish I was still there right now. Very, very clean. There's like no like trash cans or rubbish bins on the streets. It's like, people, if you bring stuff with you or you get food, like you carry a bag, you put your rubbish in the bag and then you put it in the bin when you get home, right? Like it's streets like super, super clean. These shops that are like 8 levels. You just go up and there's like a whole section on each. There's like electronics. There's a whole thing for food. And then there's the gacha machines, which are awesome. They're like the little things you put like a few coins into and you spin them, you get the ball. They're just everywhere. But the card shops are really, really cool. Obviously, Pokemon was probably the biggest TCG that we saw there. One Piece was a close second. One Piece in general is like really, really big there from what we saw. Lots of like anime statues and stuff like that. We went to a few different places looking for Lorcana cards. One shop in particular was really cool where they had like 3 PCs in the back where you could go on, and it was like their own website basically. You could add the cards to a cart, and then once you checked out, you'd get like a ticket. Some guy would come down from upstairs and just have your cards in a little packet, and you go and pay for them, which I thought was really cool because, like I mentioned on the podcast before, at least where I am here in Ireland, there's like maybe one store that does singles, and sure, they're in a folder, in a binder, and you can look through them, but it's not that common compared to what I see in like America a lot of the time, where there'll be like, these big glass cabinets with loads of singles out and like loads of binders and stuff. So it was really cool to be able to say, right, I'm in Japan, I want to get like I want to get a play set of Merlin Goat or Friends on the Other Side, and I can just go basically like click and collect and then leave. So yeah, it was really, really cool. And we did that for a bit. We went to like Tokyo Disneyland. We went to Tokyo Disney Sea. That was insane. Like the animatronics and robots and stuff that they have on their rides were really, really cool. And then we went to Star Wars Celebration, which you guys can see on the pictures that will be on the screen right now. And this was my first time like cosplaying properly. We were in Mandalorian armor. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed it. I think the thing that I enjoyed the most, and this is a reference to those of you who are longtime Podcana fans, to Brendan's tactic that he does when he goes to tournaments, right? Where he puts on the shades, he puts on the cap, he pulls up his hoodie, where like, oh, people don't know it's you. But like the cosplay for this was really cool because I've got a mask on. So even when people want to take pictures with me and stuff, I'm not thinking like, oh, am I smiling okay? How does my face look? I'm not usually like self-conscious when it comes to that type of stuff. But this was really, really nice because we had a little, as you guys can see as well, we had like a little baby Grogu's that Kim has painted. And there were loads of kids there, so the kids all loved the baby Grogu's. But yeah, we were literally like walking the convention center, and every 30 seconds someone would tap us on the shoulder and say, oh, can we get a picture with you? And then once we stopped to take the picture, everyone else. So there was a moment where we were trapped for about 15 to 30 minutes, just standing there, everybody walking by taking pictures of us. And you know what? I was okay with it. It was really, really cool. But yeah, like in relation to Lorcana, I had a fan reach out to me who watches our podcast. He's from America, but he lives in Hiroshima. Shout out to Matt. He came up to me and he gave us loads of Japanese promo cards. He was really, 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 really kind. I believe he said it was from his LGS bulk up in Hiroshima. So shout out to them as well. And yeah, it was really, really cool. I gave him like a Japanese Tinkerbell and I signed it for him. And yeah, super, super chill dude. So yeah, thanks again, Matt, for coming up and saying hello. I was just saying to Moyen before we started this episode of the podcast, it's a little bit surreal to think that, you know, there's some of you guys out there that are watching us from literally like halfway around the world, like in Japan, where the game's out now, thankfully, but you know, we're talking about the English meta and all of this type of stuff, and there's still people all over the world that just listen to me and Moyen sit here talking about talking about Disney Lorcana, which is a bit wild. So yeah, the event overall was amazing. I got to see some sneak peeks. We saw like Ryan Gosling come onto the stage, Pedro Pascal, all the Star Wars actors, stuff like that. It was great. And then yeah, my last day in Japan, which was only like 3 days ago, I went into a Lorcana shop, and yeah, I may have left with no money because I found an Enchanted Elsa, which I don't have an English Enchanted Elsa at the moment. There was a Japanese Enchanted Elsa, and the price was, you know what? I was on my vacation. I saved my money to buy Japan stuff, and you know what? This is something from Japan, so I treated myself. I got a Japanese Enchanted Elsa. I got an Enchanted Cinderella from set 2. I got an Enchanted Lady Tremaine from set 2. I got an Enchanted Maui from set 1. Enchanted Tinkerbell from set 1. And a few promo cards as well. So overall, the trip was amazing. Like I said, I wish I was still in Japan. Didn't get a chance to like actually play in an LGS over there. But again, that's because they're still on like their set 2 meta. So even if we did want to, we probably couldn't have. But overall, the trip was amazing.
Some set 2 decks.
Yeah, I mean, if someone wanted to play, and I'm sure we might have been able to borrow some decks, which would have been cool. But yeah, that's enough about me. The last thing I want to say about Japan and stuff like that in general is their set champs will be coming up soon. They're like first set champs with the Rockstar Stitch from set 3. I believe set 3 launches around May in Japan. And if any of you guys are in Japan, like, let us know. Are you hyped? Like myself, Moyen, Brendan, we're already saying, you know, the nostalgia from back in the set 3 days where we got to hunt for these Stitches. It was a great time. And there's also some bigger tournaments coming up in Japan where I did see some posts about this, Moyen. I'm not sure if you saw. I know DKP was talking about it, where apparently if you want to play in these events, you have to be able to speak Japanese. What do you think about that in general? I think honestly, I think it's kind of fair, especially since the game is newer there, and you know, it seems like a fair requirement in my opinion. I can't imagine just kind of going and sitting and pointing. The argument that I saw made where people were like, oh well, if there's an event in, you know, Germany or France, like a DLC, well, they don't have to speak German. They don't, you know what I mean? There's judges that are there, but I think it's a big thing in Japan that not a lot of people in Japan just also speak English, whereas I feel like in Europe there are, again, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, Moyen, but like I feel like there are a lot of Europeans that also just so happen to kind of speak English if it was taught through school or stuff like that. Whereas in Japan, it's not really the case. So just curious to hear your thoughts on that whole situation.
Yeah, I guess it is tricky because I just logistically it makes sense that it could cause a lot of problems if you wanted to play in the event and then you couldn't communicate with a lot of people that are at this event.
Sure.
But still, on the other side, it doesn't quite feel right to have people not able to play just because they don't speak Japanese. Then I've seen some people point towards like to like Ravensburger documents at like kind of outlining their non-discrimination guidelines, and it's also including language, but I'm not sure that kind of falls under that category. Because it's not really, I don't know, is it really discrimination when it's necessary to have events run smoothly?
No, I agree. I don't think it is, and I think like communication, at least basic Japanese, is like definitely needed. Like, I don't know, like, do you think if you spent like 3 or 4 weeks just learning, like, it sounds silly, but like, imagine you learned the terms like, card, draw, quest, do all this, maybe that's enough to get by. Like, it's interesting to think about, right? Maybe it is, maybe it's just not. Maybe it's then as soon as your opponent asks a general question, they could ask you how many cards you have in your hand, and you could have no idea what they've just asked you. So then you're just sitting there, because then you won't know what they've said. You're just sitting there playing your game, and then the opponent's gonna be like, well, how many they're gonna be like holding their cards up in your face, and it's just gonna get weird. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I do think it's a little bit weird because like, for the people that want to go over and travel to these events, maybe they should be able to, but I think it's also different because, like I said, that region doesn't have access to all of the card pool yet as well. So people that would be going over may have a general advantage anyways, which in my opinion, like I said, the stitches are coming out. I would want the people living in Japan and playing at these events to have at least, I'd hope that they have a similar experience to what we had, how cool it felt, everyone playing each other for the first time really competitively. And yeah, I think the reasoning and stuff makes sense for the moment. With that was pretty much my trip, so it was a great time. I'm actually heading to Germany today for a little trip. I know you guys are, oh, Kawa, are you going to the Ravensburg event? No, I'm not. Unfortunately I'm not. But for stuff coming up in the near future, like we've got the UK Games Expo event coming up, which is going to be super, super cool. Moyen's going to be chilling out with me for that. Myself and Moyen also have a Star Wars tournament coming up next week, which I have definitely practiced enough for 100%. But it's like I mentioned before, it's cool to dip our toes into other card games while Lorcana's on like a little bit of a dry spell for at least the DLC sized tournaments. But yeah, Moyen, do you want to jump into this 88 player tournament that happened it was Belgium, right? This past weekend?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So there was an 88 player event in Belgium. I think we look at the top 4 from this event.
Sure.
In general, there was a lot more red-blue in this top 16 than maybe we would have expected a few weeks ago. So it seems like red-blue is kind of catching on. And then from Belgium, there's also a lot of the players that really popularized the green-purple bird discard deck. That also performed quite well at this event with different players of them making top cut. Dinu made top 4 on the green-purple bird. Then there's a red-purple in top 4. A red-purple that came second, and discard took it all in the end. So
Yep.
Emerald Steel. And I think it definitely has some rougher matchups against maybe the like Peter Pan green purples, the Peter Pan red purples. But still, I do think if you get the right matchups, it can still be a very, very decent meta for Emerald Steel, because it seems to be one of the few decks that actually has a pretty good matchup against red-blue. And yeah, I think the build of the Emerald Steel is also very interesting with the Clarabelle, kind of saying like, okay, I don't just go all in on my discard plan. Also, if you try to outdraw my discard, I can just deviate from this discard plan and instead play a Clarabelle and play the game like that. I think that's quite interesting. Again, in general, this meta seems like it's so tricky, because you could say, okay, now that red blue is on everyone's radar and it has like these weaknesses against discard, that discard could just easily keep it in check. But the problem is the decks that like there's also the decks on the rise that are good against discard with like the Peter Pan red purples, etc. So the counters of red blue also have their weaknesses against other decks in the format. So it's a very very dynamic meta, I think.
For sure, yeah. Just in relation to the Clarabelle, do you think that's in there specifically for like maybe the Amethyst matchups as well? Because if, like you said, if they can kind of outdraw, the Clarabelle can come down and regain some cards themselves.
Yeah, it's like most decks, they don't have the option to go for this plan to outdraw John. They have to kind of like maybe out-tempo it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the purple deck, sometimes they can just like spam rabbits in even Finders Keepers to stabilize the hand size. And then I think that's where Clarabelle can do a lot of work.
Yeah, no, I think this build is quite interesting from Justin. This is the winner was Justin from World Class Cards, by the way. A very, very good Lorcana player, and really, really cool build. A little less on the muses, so only on 2 muses. One Pluto is quite interesting. The Zeus in there makes sense. Like, Zeus wasn't really a card that we typically saw within Green Steel in the past. But I think it makes sense now because of the Maui Sharks running around and stuff like that. Less Bruno. I think that, like, if you want to play this deck out yourself, like, you could consider putting some more Bruno in. There's also the idea of maybe you could try and put in more the other song. It's oh my god, I can't remember the name of the song. It's the resist one. You give something. I'm still here. That's the one. You could try I'm Still Here. But I think it's interesting because where I see a lot of those cards being pushed out is probably, in the inclusion of the Clarabelle, the Pluto, and not only that, but there's like this is like Max John, Max discard stuff, right? It's 4 John, 4 Hypnotize, which isn't always the case with these discard decks. I can kind of see, sometimes I see like 2 John, 3 John, but yeah, like really going all in on this, and it's quite interesting for sure. The only other tricky thing with a deck like this that I always find is for the start, you're like, and there's also no Cove in this, right? You're very reliant. If you miss the 1-drop Diablo, it's fine, but usually, you want to have the shift line. You really needed the Morph or the Ursula line, and that's quite interesting because sometimes if you don't get that, basically, like, if you miss your 2-drop as well, it can be pretty rough. If you just play an Ursula and you miss sniping the song, it can be okay. But like, then the follow-up to that has to be pretty strong, right? Like, if you go like no 1-drop and then you just play 2-drop Ursula, say you don't hit a song, you kind of want to be doing like Prince John Sudden Chill, or at least playing like Ursula if you're on the play, and then kind of regaining some tempo with, like, singing Let the Storm Rage On or something. But I just think it's like pointing at the openers of this deck are quite interesting, because that's probably of course it is. It's the turns that will matter the most to kind of really get you into the game, and then in the late game you've got a lot of really neat things that you can do. So, like, I know it's probably been a while since you've messed around with Green Steel as well, but overall, do you like this? Like, like, would you like to see maybe like a Smee or a Calhoun, or do you think with the inclusion of this 4 Morph, it's like, no, like, we're going all in on this Floodborn package and we're making sure that we can try and shift something as soon as possible?
No, I'm liking this version a lot. It's kind of been the version that I've been preferring for the longest time. Not exactly this Pete Clarabelle version, but like in general, having this more of alternative line on turn 2 with the set piece, and now with the inclusion of Pete and Clarabelle, that's like kind of supporting that even more. So I think this list looks very, very strong, to be honest.
Sure, yeah. We're going to take a look at the top 4 lists since we have some time at the moment. So moving on to the second place list, this is from MVDB. It's a Ruby Amethyst list. Very similar to the idea, at least, that we were talking about on last week's episode of the podcast with the Peter Pan into the Maui Half Shark, but also has some really cool inclusions in here. So we can see a 1 of Queen's Castle, which, you know what, like, I could see Queen's Castle sneaking its way back into certain Ruby Amethyst decks, because, like, this location was everywhere back in like set 3, set 4. So, if there's space to include it, I think it makes sense, and especially if you want to try to keep your card draw going. Like, this is pretty annoying for maybe a discard opponent to deal with, so I can see good reason why that's in there. We also see the 4 of Lumiere, which I think you briefly mentioned last week, that you were saying about the brothers who played Ruby Amethyst, they tested out the Lumiere. Can you talk about your thoughts about Lumiere in general as a card, and maybe what it does in general, or why you think maybe it has a place within Ruby Amethyst?
Yeah, I think the Lumiere is really interesting to see whether it will stick or not, but it can just make some of the trades extremely awkward for your opponent when suddenly like your exerted Peter Pans or exerted Genies have 3 strength. Even the Rabbit, so it can just facilitate some trades. And it's not, I still don't think it's like an insane 2-drop, but it kind of might be the best of the bunch that we have right now. It's kind of Flynn's falling out of favor and not really a great card in the current meta. So that now like Lumiere or Pegasus kind of seem to be the ones that have the most impact. I think the castle is really interesting. But the split kind of makes sense in a way where, in general, most of the time you prefer library, but then there will be situations where castle can be better for numerous reasons. One could just be that you kind of need to play a Mekdak mana, but you're in purple, so you just want to have this like 2 lore location to raise a deck that kind of wants to sit back and clear your board. But on the other hand, I think you mentioned discard, whereas the draws of the libraries, they're kind of like hard to get in the right situation, because you also need to sacrifice a unit in it. The unit might get removed before that, or maybe they remove the unit in the library, and then if you draw, they might hit you with a discard or a draw on the board. Whereas if the castle sticks, you can kind of at times get into this pattern of get somewhat ahead on board and then empty your entire hand, but then have the like start of turn extra draw, so that even when you start your turn with 0 cards in hand, you still have another good turn to follow that up, and then it can kind of snowball a little bit or enough to where you can continuously play cards against discard, which isn't always granted otherwise. So I think the 3-1 split also makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really cool inclusion. Like that reason that you mentioned there, to get the extra cards kind of at the start of the turn is pretty cool. The library is usually better if you want to be maybe a little bit more aggressive, you want to just start questing, but that is a little bit more vulnerable to discard in general. There's also 2 Pirate's Life in here as well, which is quite cool. Like, I think if you're playing for Maui Shark, if you want to fit in some more decent actions like a Pirate's Life, it's pretty good. During my trip to Tokyo, brought DKP Red Blue and Amber Emerald, and I was playing against Kim, and some of the stuff she was able to do against me with the Maui Half Shark and Pirate's Life, of then being able to hit into something like chaining, gaining all this type of lore, and it does kind of fit into what Ruby Amethyst has always, kind of typically done, which is kind of getting that instantaneous lore gain, which is quite funny because there's no goats in this list. So like the interesting thing is like, the lore gain is maybe it's through the Pirate's Life and through stuff like that instead, and just through the Maui Shark. So I think it's a cool list in general for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of filling that hole of the missing goat.
Moving on, we've got the green purple birds list, which I don't know if it's changed too much over time. This particular build by BP Dinu it looks pretty clean. Like there's a lot of 3s I can see. There's a lot of 4s that I can see. There's two foxes, which kind of makes sense honestly, because you don't really want to be bouncing stuff too much in this deck, right? You want to be kind of just be playing 1, 2, 3s that are going to be sticking to the board. You've got the Peter Pan into the Diago, which is very similar to your deck, Moyen. 3 Cricky as well. I already spoke about how much I love Cricky in last week's episode of the podcast. And yeah, this build just looks like super, super solid. I think I'd recommend that if anyone hasn't tried the green purple birds list yet, like this is a very, very solid foundation to test it on. I think the interesting thing that I'd like to ask you about, Moyen, and I think I remember it last week, but I don't think I asked you. There's 2 Prince John in this deck, and I think there was 2 Prince John in your deck as well, right? What are your thoughts on that count specifically, and why is it at that number, and why is it not a little bit more? Do you think it's kind of just a little bit extra? You want to be playing these other decent 3 drops instead? Or like, why do you not want to maybe maximize the Johns a bit more?
Yeah, it definitely has multiple reasons. Okay, so for just because you said earlier, maybe it's like that hasn't changed too much, but actually, this version, when it started being played a lot, it wasn't really on this like Peter Pan Iago thing.
Sure.
So that's like the new twist on the green purple Diablo discard decks that people are playing. But yeah, so with the John, I think one reason is you really like you don't, because this is green purple, that's not green steel. You can't just like play an Ursula, like the 3-cost Ursula into like John Sudden Chill, because you can't really play the 3-cost. Or the 3-cost Ursula isn't as great without like Storm Mage on and Strength. And then also because you're lacking that removal, you cannot always afford to lose all this tempo by developing John. And then the downside of drawing multiple Johns is also increased. And the deck can function pretty well without it. And then the other side of it is you also play you also play the Peter Pan. That's an uninkable 3-drop that you often want to be developing on 3. So you cannot play too many of these uninkable 3-drops.
Yep. I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, even comparing this to like the uninkable count of 3-drops in my Amber Emerald deck, like, you know, I've got the 4 Diablo and the 4 Johns, and at times if you draw too many of them sequentially, it's very bad. Like, it's very, very bad. So yeah, I think fitting in the appropriate amount makes sense when you want to fit in this Peter Pan package as well. The last deck I want to take a look at is another Ruby Amethyst deck, and this one is very spicy. Definitely different is what I'll say. So it plays only 4 1-drops. It plays the Chernobog's Fall of Rose, which, I don't mean to laugh. It's not like, I'm not saying that's bad at all. I'm just saying it's surprising, because I think everyone's so used to seeing like, oh, you just play like, you know, these usual 12 1-drops or whatever within Ruby Amethyst. But the 3-1 Pegasus is in here, which makes sense because that's pretty good with dealing with the Diablos and stuff like that. Peter Pan's in here, Iago's in here. Jim Hawkins has been included, which, again, if you want to play a few more Queen's Castle and go a little bit more in on the location package, I think Jim Hawkins can work out pretty nicely. But this is like a very top end like list, right? It's got 4 Maleficent Monstrous Dragons. It's got 4 Finders Keepers as well. But clearly this deck performed decently, and like, you know, looking back at the general meta breakdown of this event is, I mean, red blue was the highest, and then closely behind that it was green purple discard. But then there was kind of this subsection of, there was like red purple locations, red purple bounce control, and red purple aggro. So red purple in general actually made up 27%. So if you want to take that as a whole, it's actually the second most played in combination. So
but that's just regarding the top cut, right?
Oh yeah, yes. Sorry, yes. But yeah, so just your general thoughts. You can jump into this list, of course, if you want to, but general thoughts on what do you think Red Purple versus Ruby Sapphire looks like now? Because I remember, like, back in the day, specifically, I want to say like Bochum days, like that was like kind of set 4, right? It was Red Purple's pretty good into Red Blue. Because I remember, I think I'm remembering this right, where like you were like, man, I just keep facing all the red purples in this event. What's going on? What's happening?
That was a lot of sets ago. That was like, was it set 4?
It's set 4, yeah. It's near, like, close to a year ago, probably like 9-10 months ago, yeah.
Yeah, so that, I think this version has always been, like the Shark version has always been a lot better against red purple. But
sorry, you mean the red blue version has always been better against sure.
Yes. And I think like it like the other thing is, okay, so I think this version is a lot better at dealing with the early part of the game against red purple, and it can stabilize quite well, but it doesn't quite have the same finishing power. So then red purple has sometimes the chance to maybe recover the game if they can stabilize the sharks and manas early enough. So like playing lots of card draw and Tremaines, but also ways to deal with the manas is generally a way that Red Purple can improve the matchup. So
Sure.
yeah, I think this deck could be tailored pretty decently towards that matchup.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Well, yeah, there you have it. That is the top 4 deck lists from that 88 player event. There's not too much more to say for this episode of the podcast. I guess I'll get your final thoughts, Moyen, moving into this event in Ravensburg this weekend. Anything you're expecting? Anything you're looking forward to? I guess you're probably just like looking forward to compete again, see some familiar faces. It's like the closest thing we've had to a DLC since like the European Championships last year, right? So I think that's going to be quite fun. But is there anything else you're excited for? Like, do you think there might be any new innovations or stuff like that?
I think I'm excited for having a diverse meta where I think lots of things have a completely fair shot and lots of decks are playable. I personally don't expect the greatest innovation this set still, as we're kind of playing we never really played this format without Flower Charm and Fortisphere, but I don't think the implications of that are that big that we have this completely crazy format that we never had before. I think a lot of it is still kind of determined by the stuff that we've been having for a lot of sets. That doesn't mean that this will, I'm still happy with having this diverse meta, but I don't think this will be the meta where we find some crazy new deck to break it.
Sure. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, but in general, I'm living good life right now with Lorcana Major this week, then Star Wars Major next week. Card games can be kind of a drag at times, and then figuring out new games also. It's always a blast.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a fun next few weeks, and then we're going to be coming into the lead up of set 8 card reveals as well as we lead into May and the set champ seasons and stuff. So I think it's going to be a good time all around. I'm excited to learn more about Reign of Jafar, see if we're going to get any new mechanics, see if we have any interesting returning mechanics, if there's going to be more illusion characters, stuff like that. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the episode. If you guys enjoyed this week's episode, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, your local podcast platform. There's a video version of this available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are @Moyen_HS and @Kawatech_CG. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.